Hey everyone, I'm so glad that you are still with us here for our very last panel of the day. It has certainly been a whirlwind of art classes and cocktail workshops and more. And we're going to end Beers Without Beards and Powered by Bumble with an amazing panel that we created in collaboration with Chart Industries. So for those of you that don't know, Chart Industries is known widely in the industry for their frost-free vacuum-insulated liquid nitrogen equipment. So essentially, it's the equipment that helps brewers make those amazingly smooth nitro beers that we all enjoy. But what you may not know is that Chart is actually at the forefront of establishing programs and mentorships aimed at diversity and inclusion. This past March, the Women on Board recognized Chart Industries as a W for winning company because their corporate board was composed of 20% women directors in 2019. And at the very helm of Chart Industries, we have President and CEO Jill Ivanko, who is joining us today in collaboration with James Kane, who is Chart Industries liquid nitrogen dosing specialist. They're both going to be moderating our panel on women in beer leadership. So we have a stellar panel of women from across the country who are in just amazing positions in their own breweries or have started their own breweries from the ground up and are going to be helping us tackle these really tough questions of how, as women, we can break through barriers in a predominantly white male industry. So I'm going to kick it over to Jill and James to have them take us away and help introduce our panelists. I'll be back at the end to help moderate a Q&A. So if you guys have questions throughout the panel, just feel free to drop them in the comments and we'll get back to them at the end. So Jill, I'm going to hop out and let you and James take us away here.
Sounds great. Thanks, Grace. And thanks everybody for joining us today. It's one of the very few opportunities I have to actually drink at work. So thanks to everybody for having me today. We're here with 4 outstanding leaders in craft beer who just happen to be women. So looking forward to the discussion today. We're going to kick it off with introductions and hearing a little bit about the journeys from each of these 4 outstanding leaders. Let's start with Julie Verratti. So Julie is the Chief Brand Officer and co-founder of Denizens Brewing Company. I have had the opportunity to try Denizens, and it is fantastic. People would say, hey, are you a craft brewing fan? And I would say, absolutely, you have to be as a result of running a business that sells equipment into the industry. But before co-founding Denizens, Julie was quite the person in politics, so a presidential management fellow and senior policy advisor at the U.S. Small Business Administration. And she has won numerous awards. In 2016, named to the Washington Business Journal's 40 Under 40. And in 2019, I believe, won an award with Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. And her free time, I hear Julie loves soccer and can be seen out on her motorcycle. So with that, Julie, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Sure. Thank you, Jill, so much. And if you're drinking that third-party triple right now, you might want to take it a little easy because you're going to get tanked. That beer is about 9% alcohol. Maybe you're going for that. But first, thanks so much for having me here on the panel. It's an honor to be here, hanging out with you guys and chatting with you. I actually got into craft beer when I was in law school. I had started drinking craft beer. This was in like the mid to early 2000s and got so into it. I tend to be one of those people that once I get into something, I really just sort of hit the gas pedal on it. And my sister got me one of those Mr. Beer homebrew kits, started brewing at home, really fell in love with it. Dirty little secret about me, I'm actually a terrible brewer. I don't make the beer for Denizens, and if I did, we would not be in business. But I do love I loved having that hobby and really, really enjoyed sort of the science and the art behind it. Luckily for me, I was able to start Denizens with my wife, Emily Bruno, and my brother-in-law, Jeff Ramirez. And Jeff had been a professionally trained and employed brewer for about 7 years when we kicked off Denizens in 2014. I was born and raised in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C., and we were able to found Denizens back about 6 years ago in my hometown. And since then, we've expanded to a second location, which is our larger production facility. I'm actually in the back office of that facility right now, talking to you guys in Riverdale Park, which is right near University of Maryland, also just right outside of D.C. I did work in the government. I am an attorney, but I have to tell you the best job I've ever had is working in beer. And I love this industry and I love all the people, and I love the diversity of it and just the opportunities, and it's just so much fun. So cheers, guys. Looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie, and lots of great linkages there to our next panelist, Megan Wilson. So Megan is the head of operations at Torch and Crown Brewing Company. Facilitator is the word that I was told. And as we had some prep discussions for the panel here, what Grace told me is Megan's job is to make shit happen. So Megan, also I hear that you like karaoke, new restaurants, and have an irrational fear of possums. So we might want to hear a little bit about that too. But Megan, I had the opportunity to try the Share House. And similar to Julie, I'm from the East Coast, and this brought back great memories for me around, I love the little story on the side of the can and around spending an exorbitant amount of money on a Share Shore House. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I guess similar to Julie, I'm not a brewer. I didn't have a background as a brewer, so I had a pretty non-standard entry into the industry because I also was never a home brewer. But I got into craft beer, in college as a prolific consumer. So there was a brew pub down the street from my college, and they, at that time doing a lot of different Belgian styles and things I had never experienced. And it was just such an interesting, entree and, into the beer industry, into craft beer, and it really got my interest peaked. But, after college, I moved to New York City. I was from New Jersey originally. I always wanted to live in New York City. I wanted to live in Manhattan, and, was really motivated by, everything that Manhattan means in terms of, ambition and what have you. And so I initially went into operations in the finance industry and worked there for a number of years. But even throughout that, I would spend my weekends, visiting craft breweries in Brooklyn and Queens. And, whenever I traveled, which I love to travel, I would always seek out the breweries and craft beer bars wherever I was going. And I always wanted to stay plugged into the industry. And a little over 2 years ago now, John, who's one of the co-founders of Torch and Crown, and also someone I used to work with in the finance industry, reached out to me and kind of explained to me his vision for opening a craft brewery, in the middle of Manhattan, in Soho, in the heart of the city. And I was really excited by the ambition of that, by everything that meant. And then, also just having lived in Manhattan, not far from where the brewery is about to open for so many years, I love the idea of what bringing that to a community that I loved could mean. And at the same point, I was really excited that he wanted me to be a part of it, and it would give me an opportunity to take, the expertise and everything that I learned doing operations in the finance industry and, be able to apply that to grow a company in an industry I was passionate about, in the craft beer industry. And, I'm really excited that, in the next few weeks or so, we should be finally bringing that vision to fruition and having the tap room open in short order. Maybe not in the way we initially envisioned it, but you know what? I think that's part of it, just having that perseverance and whatnot is just goes to what we've been trying to do. So.
Great. Well, and really neat. So those will be some of the topics that we'll touch on this evening around some of our male counterparts in industry and how they support us and vice versa. And so we'll get back to that after we introduce our remaining two panelists. So next on the introduction list is Dawn Schultz, the owner of Prison City Pub and Brewery, which has been open since 2014. And one of the things that has really struck me after learning a lot about everyone's background is that y'all have been really recognized for a lot of what you've done, and in many cases in a very short period of time. And that is definitely the case for Dawn and her brew pub. So the gold medal for Mass Riot Hazy IPA. So I got mailed this thing, which is the Mass Riot. Very cool because it has the name written on the side with the date on it. It requires two hands, Dawn, so thank you for that. And very, very interesting. Very perfect. I also enjoyed my favorite one from yours was the Escape from Alcaraz. So great names and really interesting. I could go on the list of awards that that I saw that Dawn and her brewery have received, but I'll turn it over to you, Dawn, to introduce yourself. And I believe you also have a new production facility coming online soon too.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and I'm super excited to be sitting here with all of you. So these are 32-ounce crowlers. We actually don't can our beer yet because we're in a small brew pub. We have a 5-barrel system. Everything we have goes straight to tap. We're 650 barrels a year, which in production beer world is pretty tiny drop in the bucket. But we're in the middle of expanding and going to a 20-barrel system and looking to grow over the next 5 years to 10,000 barrels. And so the next time we send you beer, I'll put it in a can, a 16-ounce can. But yeah, so that was Mass Riot. That sort of launched our expansion project. It was named #1 IPA in the country by Pace Magazine a couple of years ago, and that really kind of turned things around for the brew pub. Everybody comes and wants to know, where's Mass Riot? Where's Mass Riot? And so we're going to make them some more of it. But I started out working in restaurants. My background is restaurants, including brew pubs, and going to college, getting a business degree. I worked in a German restaurant that had 100 beers on their menu, and that was quite a while ago, back in early 1990s. And that was kind of one of the things that we did, was just sort of start checking off the list and going around the country on that list and trying all the beers. And I went from being a White Zinfandel lover to a craft beer lover in a summer working at that restaurant, and I'm very grateful for it. So fast forward, we opened, some friends and I opened a restaurant in Lake Placid. I dabbled in home brewing a little bit, but kind of like Julie and Megan, I'm not a brewer, not good at it at all. Wish I was, but not even a little bit. It's mostly cleaning. I don't have the patience for it. And my beer, if we were brewing my beer, we would not be open. So same scenario. But my husband and had worked at Sam Adams at the time of me owning a couple of restaurants, and we moved to Auburn, New York, for his job, and I opened a restaurant here. And we had always kind of toyed with the idea of opening a brew pub. It was sort of a dream, someday we'll open a brew pub, and eventually the time was just right, and we were too afraid for him to leave his job because we needed that income and support with our kids, and so I left my job, which was managing a production facility of another sort, and then took on opening the brew pub for a couple of years before Mark came on board, and he's my partner there now. And likewise, I'm heading the expansion brewery and leading opening that facility. That's about it.
Awesome. All right. So far we're 3 for 3 on nobody is a brewer in craft brewing. So Maíra Kimura. I practiced your name. I hope I did that right.
Yes, thank you.
Are you going to break the mold? But before you answer that question, Maíra, you and your 2 co-founders started in 2014, and a very unique story around the background from your history, where you came from, and we'd love to hear a little bit about that in your journey on how you got to where you are. One of the things that I thought was really unique about your background and your experience is that not only are you, one of the fewer females in the industry, one of the fewer Japanese descendants into craft brewery, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that. I did also get the chance to try a couple of yours. Okay, so what I thought was really neat as I read about the brewing that you do is how you infuse the various different elements of flavor profiles that come through your experiences in the different regions that you've been in. So let's take it away from there.
Okay, thanks, Jill. First, thanks for inviting me. I'm kind of like very excited to be here, and I want to apologize in advance because English is not my mother language, so maybe I don't speak so well as.
Well, let's put it this way.
Right?
I only speak English, so you're already way ahead of me.
So I started like in the industry, like kind of by accident. I was like looking for something else to do. I worked with marketing before. I was building a career in marketing, but my ex-husband was transferred to Paris in 2008-9. And then I started to look for other things to study. I mean, I was in the capital of the wine, and I decided to study wine. And then I realized it was like it was not my thing. And then I started to look for places to study beer because that's something I always liked. But I didn't understand really well about the process of making beer because my background is like advertising and marketing and stuff. So I started to look for courses, and I found one in Sunderland in the UK. And then I went there, spent like almost 4 months there between like the course, like the technical course, and internships. And then I completely fell in love with it and decided that that's gonna be my thing. That's not a hobby. First, it was kind of like a hobby, but then I realized that I could do something because in Brazil we're not as much advanced in the beer like thing like you guys are. So back then, like the it was starting, it was not very mature yet. It's not. I mean, it's been like growing a lot in the last few years. But when I came back to Brazil in 2012, I started to like try to find out what's going on, and then I joined Home Brewers Association of Brazil. It's called a Serva, and then I met a lot of people, and then I got into a project that was already in progress. It was called Duas Cabeças. Then I started there like a partner too, and in parallel we started Japas in 2014. Because almost by accident too, because we are Fernanda Ueno and Yumi Shimada, my business partners. They were also working in the beer industry. Yumi makes a lot of collages, and she makes labels for our breweries. And Fernanda Ueno, my other partner, who's also a brewer, she used to work for a brewery here too. So we were like, "Now we're the Japanese girls of the beer and stuff. Let's make a beer like 30-liter like system and just for fun." And then we did like a pale ale with wasabi. We tried a lot of ingredients first, but then we made this pale ale with wasabi, and then it was so good that we decided to start looking for a partner to make it. Back then we didn't have like a company yet. It was just like a small side project for everybody. So we started to make. We did one batch of this beer, like 700 liters. I'm sorry, I brew there in the US, but I can't like think in barrels yet. Only I have to do the math. So we did like a 700 liters batch in a brew pub here in São Paulo, and it was like a huge success. So we decided like, yeah, we have something here. Let's start to make this like for real. And then we did like contract brewing in a brewery in Ribeirão Preto, São Paulo. Then we moved to a brewery called Dádiva in São Paulo too. And then we started to do a lot of different things, like trying to explore our origins, because we're not Japanese. We're half Japanese, half Brazilian, all of us. And we were not that connected with that side of like Japanese side. So we started to study a lot and research ingredients. And it's been like an amazing journey for us, like personally and professionally. and we're still learning, but I'm completely in love with brewing and like being in this industry. It's like very, very good.
That's fantastic. And I think what you just said is so important, is we're all still learning every day. You guys all are extremely successful and just fascinating, the different backgrounds, right? You have law, you have marketing, you have production, finance, and you have various different geographies. We just touched on, Paris, Brazil, the East Coast, Germany, you name it. So with that, a little bit about whether it's the brewing industry or whether it's the industry that we're in terms of industrial manufacturing, it's certainly historically is male dominated. And from here on, feel free to chime in with each other, and you don't have to wait for me to call on you, but I might chime in between. But let's start with Megan, just around you actually work, I believe, for founders that are both male. And could you tell us a little bit about what does it mean to you to be a female leader, whether it's in the industry or just in life?
Sure. So, I mentioned a little bit about this coming in, but I felt like some of the challenges I had with taking on that role were a bit twofold. So not only was I a female stepping into an industry that was historically male dominated, but also I was coming without a background in brewing, and my exposure to craft beer was as a consumer, not as a producer, and I was stepping into a 30-barrel production facility, that was producing our own beer, but also contract brewing on behalf of other brands. And, I was eventually taking on a lot of that and managing and overseeing that. So, there was definitely a steep learning curve. I knew that coming in, and, I came in knowing I was capable of taking that on. I had the right basis and background in my expertise in operations, and I knew, a lot of that could be applicable, if shifted towards the craft beer industry. And, I knew if I was passionate about it, I would put in the time and effort to be able to get up to speed quickly enough to be able to deliver and support my team. But for me, part of that was, it was great that I had, both of the founders, again, who were both white male founders, but they both were very supportive and understood, where I was at coming in. They knew what my background is and what I could offer. I'd even worked with John for 4 or 5 years before that. So, I knew I had a good working relationship with him, but I also knew, there was another challenge in the team I was stepping in to work with and ultimately manage and lead. And I needed to build their trust, that have them trust that I was capable of what, I knew that I could take on. So a lot of that came early on. I was leveraging them, asking them a lot of questions about what they were doing, and use them as a resource, both to educate myself, but also to make sure, they not only knew what they were doing, but the why of it, and build that mutual trust, so that, once I get up to speed and, they're aware that I'm listening, I care about what they're doing, and I trust that they know what they're doing, and then they simultaneously would build that trust in me, that they know that, I could be a resource and I could be someone who could advocate for them and make sure I'm creating an environment that they're comfortable working in, and, they're comfortable coming to me with whatever, even if it is brewing related, that even if I don't know the answer, I'll be able to find it out for them and make sure they're supported in reaching that answer. And, ideally help them to figure out that answer themselves, without me having to tell them or walk them through it or whatnot. So that was a big aspect for me. And, just being a leader in general, but also being a female leader is, making sure you exude the confidence in knowing that you're capable of what you're setting out to do, and building that trust within your team to make sure that they're aware that, I know that about myself, that they believe that too. And, they believe that I'm going to start making the right decisions for them. So, after asking them all of those questions and whatever else, I would make sure to demonstrate wherever I could that I was listening to them, that I was learning, everything. And, I think it gotten to a point where, we have that rapport and it's really demonstrated. So even if I was, the only woman in the room, they knew I was a resource and they could come to me. And then hopefully, ultimately, as we grow the team and start to expand and bring in another woman, they don't have to go through and iterate that same process, right? That's culture is already established, that ability, is demonstrated, and we can kind of grow the environment from there.
Yeah. I had a little bit of a similar situation, Megan, in that when I was opening the brew pub, I had a list of 100 brewers that I could choose from, and some of them had been established for 30 years, and they were working on 30-barrel systems. And I ultimately ended up going with someone who was a home brewer and who was also starting out, because I wanted us to be able to grow together, as opposed to someone kind of saying to me, no, this is the way it's supposed to be done, because that wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted to be able to kind of establish the business the way that we wanted it to work. And that really has proved successful for us, and just kind of asking questions and learning from them as a way to also follow through on making sure that they know what they're doing, which really struck home with me.
Well, those are great, and I wrote down a few words here: capable, confident, listening, grow together, and I think it's, regardless of what industry you're in, I think that's a great characterization of how to be a strong leader. So let's hear a little bit from James, who is also a craft brewer, and he happens to have joined Chart just about a year and a half ago. So James, why don't you ask some questions and let's get a male diverse view in here.
Thank you very much, Jill, and thanks all of the panelists. And this is such an honor to be with all of you here today. And you have such inspiring stories. It's really a great pleasure to be talking here with you. As Jill mentioned, I do come from the brewing industry as well. In 2012, I founded a brewery, and that was a completely different time in the brewing world. We're talking there was only 2,500 breweries in the US around that time. So it's really been very exciting to see how much the landscape has changed over the past decade, and how different entrepreneurs and innovators of all backgrounds have really joined together to create the environment that we all get to play in today. I'd like to ask the group here, what steps would you like to see more breweries take, for those that are listening, to make the industry more diverse, more equitable, more inclusive? And if you have any examples of what you're doing at your breweries right now, whether it be other programs or just culture or business philosophies that you have, please share those as well. And let's hear from Julie, because we haven't heard from her since last question.
It's a good question. I didn't really talk about this when I was introducing myself, but for those of you who don't know, I am actually on the board of directors for the Brewers Association. I sit as a brew pub seat, and I am currently the interim chair of the diversity committee. So there's a lot of stuff that we've been working on, and I've been an active member, both chair and member of the diversity committee since 2017, so about 3 years now. I mean, one thing I can tell you that, just to bring it down to the micro level of sort of an example of what Denizens does to try to recruit, to find people that aren't already in the industry, is doing things like posting jobs at the local community college job board or any of the local universities, and not necessarily just on the popular beer websites. Brewbound is great. I read it, I enjoy it, and we can post there as well, but really making sure that we're reaching out to different communities. That's just one very small example. Making sure that you are building a team and creating an atmosphere in your tap room, for those of you who have them, that is inviting to the entire community. So, for example, I remember this one Saturday we had, obviously this was pre-COVID, we had, and the way our building is set up in Silver Spring, we have two floors inside, and then we have an entire massive outside beer garden. So like 3 distinct spaces, so to speak. In the beer garden, we were throwing a drag show. Upstairs, we actually had, it was like a local non-denominational church was doing like a Bible study in one area. The other area, we had a sewing group going on. And then downstairs, we had a medical marijuana program where we had people there to sort of see like what they could access, because Maryland has legalized medical marijuana. So that's what I mean by make sure that you are creating a safe space and a proactively creating spaces for people from across the community. You know, having events and making sure that you are reaching out and think about the different local organizations that you're partnering with. You know, we at Denizens, and I'm sure every single one of the folks on the panel right now can attest to this for themselves. And most breweries do this as well, as we try to partner with local community organizations. And that's a really important part of our business, like our business ethos. You know, it's funny when I think about COVID, one of the things that has kind of broken my heart a lot about this is when I think about all of the local community organizations that have partnered with breweries across the country over the years. And now everyone's hit with COVID, and just sort of, what does that look like going forward, right? And the ripple effect of that. But we're still trying to do and hold events where, you know, just last weekend we had a get out the vote, you know, voter sign up, voter information, supporting local businesses to come in and sort of sell their wares at our tap room as well. And just making sure that we're supporting the community the way that we can, because the more welcome people feel, and it has to be an authentic people feel welcome. Because if you're not authentic, people aren't going to feel welcome. They're just going to think you're full of shit. Let's just be honest about that. The more folks are going to be interested when you do post a job, say, hey, we're hiring for this position. More folks are going to, you know, tell their friends, and they're going to want to come and apply for it. So those are just a couple of examples of what we've done at Denizens. And I think that it, you know, we're not unique. I think it can work across the board, no matter where you're coming from for your business.
Yeah, I think those are great examples, and wise words. Hopefully, that some brewers that are listening can take, you know, can listen to that and apply them in their own marketing efforts and promotional and everything. Is anybody else got any good examples of what they're doing in their own breweries?
So just one thing I'd add. Oh, sorry. You want to go?
No, you go. No, you go.
We did. I'm lucky in New York City. We have a really prolific community of women in the beer industry, and you know, and as Julie said, everything's become a lot harder to stay connected throughout COVID. But we formed a Slack group that we've been able to stay, you know, in communication regularly. You know, Zoom happy hours, whatever else, to stay connected, stay informed. You know, use each other as resources if we're trying to navigate all of the issues that have come up, you know, out of nowhere because of COVID. And it's also a resource where people post jobs and other opportunities, similarly to what Julie was saying, posting at local community colleges. And I think that's been a really great resource for me and within our community. And then separate from that, like another idea similarly that we've done that unfortunately was interrupted by COVID this year as well. But we organized with a local high school in the Bronx where a production facility is located. And they came in, like their science teacher brought them on a field trip, and they spent the afternoon with our head brewer kind of talking through, you know, practical applications of the sciences they're learning in the classroom. And, you know, it was a really exciting opportunity for us to connect with the community. And we actually had a few individuals from that field trip who reached out to us about internship opportunities. And we brought them on as interns last summer. We would have liked to have had them back this year, but that's something, you know, I think we definitely want to continue with and keep perpetuating. Because, you know, our head brewer, even being, you know, the quintessential white male, had said he wished somebody had told him in high school how he could apply, you know, that information he was learning in science class to an industry like this. And just getting those practical applications in front of people can really, you know, influence and get people more involved in the STEM areas, you know, which is so needed right now.
Yeah. Kind of piggybacking on what Julie said, and one of the things is we do a lot of collaborations. And they're out there, and everyone is usually invited to take part. There was recently a Black is Beautiful. Threes does a People Power, which supports the ACLU. We've done a couple of others, and it's usually a form of exposure and gaining attention for that, but also you know, in the form of a donation of the sales of that beer. And so that's been really something that we've used pretty regularly, and it's worked for us. You know, and and it still kind of shocks us that every now and then we get some backlash for it. We have people that will reach out to us and say, we're not coming to your brewery anymore because you're brewing that beer. And it floors us that exists. And so what we said, we actually have said, okay, bye. What else can you say at this point? So we really, try to have a mantra of beer is what should be bringing people together. And anything that isn't about that, it goes against all of our culture. It goes against everything that we stand for. And so we just keep thinking beer brings people together, and that's the goal.
That's great. And that's very similar. At Chart, we have diversity inclusion. We have the committees and multiple different things like you guys discussed. But ultimately, it's, how do we bring people together and how do we make our business and our customers better? And that's what diversity and inclusion really is all about. So let's go to a question that I'm going to ask all four of you to answer. Whether we like it or not, we're still the minorities in the industries that we play in. And I would say, from my experiences certainly in our industry, the males that I interact with are extremely supportive, and they want everyone to be successful regardless of gender and regardless of position. But ultimately there's still situations that can be awkward or interesting or funny. One of them for me was I was traveling with somebody. This was a few years back, and he would open the door for me, which is the polite thing to do. And I would walk through and he'd follow me. And then we'd get to an elevator and he would insist to go in first. And I'm like, wait, you wanted me to go through the door first, but you want to go into the elevator first. And so, well, it's, from the olden times where if there was no elevator in the elevator shaft, I would fall through and die before you. And so, it's kind of these stereotypical and funny stories. And the same on an escalator, apparently, that go first, and if you fall, they'll catch you. I don't know. Anyway, those types of experiences, they really, they stand out, certainly in my mind and my experience. And you get a kick out of them. You're able to tell them on panels like today. But I'd love to hear from each of you, and we'll start with Maíra, of any experience that you want to share that either has been interesting, fun, awkward, or that's made you a better leader. Any way you want to approach it.
I've been through a lot of situations in the beer industry, as much as I love it. But of course, sometimes when people don't know you and they assume you are not, like, you don't know as much as you probably do. So I've been through a lot of situations where people ask you to talk to my boss, and then, no, I'm the boss. You can talk to me. I understand. I make the beer. You can talk to me about the beer, or you can talk to me. And then I've been through a lot of awkward situations, like guys wanting to do making passes. Is that how you say? So it's kind of awkward. I've been through a lot of weird situations, but I always try to avoid and try to not fight with people, but try to educate them somehow. But it helps make us better leaders, of course, because I learned how to deal with people. I'm still learning, as I said before, but also had a lot of good inputs, a lot of good feedbacks. What I forgot to mention is that I also brew in the States since last year. We started an operation, a contract brewing operation in partnership with Beer International, which is a company that facilitates breweries from out of the United States to brew in the States. So the reception there was amazing. For me, it was here. I already know a lot of people in the industry, so everybody treats me well, and I didn't have any problems. But the reception that I had in the States, the brand had in the States, was amazing, because one day I went to a shop in Boston, I think, And the person who worked there was a woman, and she recognized me. She said, "You're the girl from that brewery that we are selling now. I read all about you." And it was so amazing for me, like, to be recognized like this, because it's like, we're not actors, or not, we're not like celebrities, right? We're normal people who brew beer, by the way. We're not like, so it was like kind of very interesting, because there's the bad side, but there's the good side too, and it's important to represent women. I mean, it's important for other women to see that we can brew. I mean, we can do anything we want, and it's like, it's not it's our business. And I mean, so
That's great. That's great. Julie, what do you think?
So I kind of had like a weird experience with this. Not weird, but sort of odd compared to most, I think, women in beer, because, you know, I'm a member of the LGBT community. I am fairly masculine in my presentation. I actually don't get a lot of the sort of normal shit that women get in beer. Like, no dudes hit on me, right? It's not happening. I'd be probably weirded out if it happened. But, you know, I personally have found that when I'm at a beer event or whatnot, I also think that I have a pretty gregarious personality. I put myself out there. I like to make friends. I like to meet new people. I'm totally one of those people that strangers are just new friends I haven't met yet, right? Which is not everybody's perspective, but that's how I am. This is also why I think I do pretty well in sales, for that reason. But I've honestly never really had a lot of issues with it. I will tell you that, so Emily, my wife, who's one of our co-founders, she's much more feminine in her presentation, sort of what you would think of as like a typical female, so to speak. And she, you know, she is our CEO. She's our administrative. She's like our CEO, our chief administrative officer. She's got a lot of the same jobs that you have, Megan, in terms of operations and whatnot. And she deals with a lot of this stuff a lot, where, you know, if you're dealing with, say, a contractor, or say something goes wrong with the glycol, or, you know, the electrical, something like that, where a plumber or electrician comes in, you know, and they ask to speak to the owner or who's in charge, they just speak right over her and don't take her seriously. But she's pretty badass. I mean, like, she just put up drywall this past weekend, right? Like, so she knows what she's doing. And she's learned these experiences just from building the brewery. You know, we were very undercapitalized when we first started, which is another huge thing that women deal with, especially in capital-intensive industries like beer. It's millions of dollars in equipment you need to get, right? And so unless you can find it on the used market, which is what we did in 2014, we built a lot of it ourselves. You know, Jeff, my other business partner, he actually basically became an electrician when we first started, because we could only afford to hire one electrician. So we hired the master electrician, and then Jeff became the assistant. And so what ended up happening beyond that, though, is that he learned all this electrical knowledge, and we saved money, and now he can like fix a bunch of stuff that's electrical now. So it worked out in the end. But you kind of have to learn how to be scrappy. And I think the biggest hurdle that women have, especially in business, is getting your foot in the door to get the capital in the front end. But I have every faith that women can prove themselves in the end, because when you look at some of the most successful companies across the board, there's a couple of things. One, you have more than one founder. Generally, the more founders you have, the more successful you're likely to be. And two, you have a diversity in terms of ownership, right? And so having women in charge is so important when you want to be successful as a company. Sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent and didn't directly answer the question, but anyway.
No, that's fantastic, and it goes really well with everything we're talking about. So Dawn, do you want to piggyback anything that's been said, or share something different on this one?
Sure. It's kind of a funny thing, because I was so used to being part of the beer community prior to opening. And there's such a collegiate group. And when I went into becoming a brewery owner, it didn't even occur to me that I was a minority, because everyone was so welcoming and so friendly. And being the woman, when I first got into the industry, it was kind of other people that told me like, oh, you're a minority in this. I was like, oh, I didn't realize. And until I guess I went to a couple of events, and I went to CBC, which is the Craft Brewers Conference, and it was either like 2014-ish. And I remember kind of walking around and going to events and looking, and I'm like, man, there are not a lot of women here. And it really sort of hit home with me at that particular event, how few there were, at least in attendance at that point, which I think is a good representation of what's happening in the industry.
Sweet though, right, Don? Yeah, exactly.
That was awesome. That part was good. And fast forward, I think, till 2019, and it definitely was starting to equal out more. It definitely, each year I've seen it progress, which is encouraging. The only thing that I have that happens negatively to me at this point is my husband is my partner now, and he really is involved in the sales of the beer, but I do most of everything else, and it's probably similar to Emily. I'm CEO. I do all the financial. I do everything like that, and but people will definitely, if we're standing together, gravitate towards asking him the question. And it's always him first, and they always look at him first. And if anyone asks him, he's like, I don't know, ask Dawn. I really have no idea. I'm just her errand boy, and talk to her, which is a great thing. He's super supportive, but it happens. And sometimes I want to just kind of reach out and punch somebody in the nose every now and then. But it's getting better.
No, it's so true. It's so funny you say that, because we have a separate chairman of our board from my role as CEO, and he's 70, white male, and we'll go into customers together, and they'll be only talking to him, and he's fantastic and says, do you need to talk to her? She's the one making the decision. She's the one going to spend the money with you or not. So the more support like that we get, the better. And James, we're going to hand it to you, but only after we hear from Megan.
Yeah, no, I can relate to what you were saying a bit, Dawn, at the beginning there, especially. So I grew up. I had a working mom and a stay-at-home dad, which was normal to me until society told me it wasn't. Right? And I think that's a lot of what we're battling as women, just general assumptions, societal norms, whatever it is, and, one experience that I always pull back to, because it just stands out to me, is one of the first brewing festivals that I worked at after I joined the company. I was at the table with the founders, and I can't tell you how many people asked me if I was dating one of them, and that's why I was there, right? And it's just like, at first I was shocked by it, but, eventually it's like, I can't really blame them, because the beer industry spent decades and decades and decades, marketing that beer as a man's drink. And, the stereotypical image of a brewer is a white man with long hair and a beard, right? So seeing me there, like, I can't blame, and a lot of those people saying that were women, but I don't blame them, right? It's the industry, and, we're correcting for it. We're making progress on that front for sure. But, there's a lot of history to unpack there. And, until we continue to chip away at that, you're going to keep experiencing these moments where people make assumptions about you, which are based on, not much else besides, their perceptions or whatever else, and not really based on the facts of, what you're doing for your company and what you're contributing. And so.
All right. Well, James, you got to show the back of your head.
Oh yeah. I'm sure they are not, but it goes that far.
All right. Hey, James, do you have any questions for the ladies?
I would love if we could just touch on one additional point, which is on brand identity and the visual side of the businesses and brands that you've all created. And I think it's such an important point to illustrate in this conversation, because so much of the beer industry has been for decades male-dominated, male-centric, and targeted toward men in just the way that the labels are generated, thinking of like 90s and early 2000s types of beer labels that were very much targeting men, or having women on the label, that kind of thing. We come a long way from that as an industry, thankfully. But I wanted to ask how you all approach your own artwork and the visual side and the visual identity of your beers and of your brand, and how you use that as a bit of a platform to deliver your messages and what's important to you as a company. I know that Megan, for Torch and Crown, you guys have some hidden messages within your logo, which is pretty cool, and I'll let you talk about that in a second. But I would love to hear from Maíra first, if possible, because I think her cans really show, some really beautiful, more almost feminine styling, which is so different, I think, from what maybe the male-dominated brewing identity has looked in the past. So really curious to hear your all thoughts on this.
Yeah, our labels are, we try not to make it feminine or like girly or something, because it's a product for everybody to drink, right? But we do like put a touch, like a feminine touch on it, because it's who we are, right? So my business partner Yumi, she does everything by collage, and she does everything by hand, and then digitalizes it. And we put a lot of like references, like we girl power in the label. We do like, we want to make people know that this beer is made by women. Not that it makes like any difference, because it's not like, it doesn't make any difference that it's made by a woman or a man, but we're proud of it. We want it like to people to know it. So I'm not sure if I answered the question.
No, that's great. When it stands out very well. If I do believe you are distributed here in the U.S. through your partner, but just in seeing it, and even in some of the beers that we were sampling here that were sent from you guys, it's nice to see that type of difference, and seeing that artistic approach, or just that touch of femininity in an industry that has been a little bit different. And Megan, I know that for your logo, the Torch and Crown logo, there's actually a little bit of a hidden message around the 3 pillars that are inside of your logo. And if I have a can here, let's see if I can bring up, let's see if that'll come through. Yeah, so the hop and then the 3 pillars actually stand for three tenets of your business. And I was just curious if, how'd you come about that, and how does that represent the way you think about what's important to your brewery, and how you translate that through your beers and business philosophies?
Sure. I mean, so much of our brand identity, since we're trying to bring a production brewery into downtown Manhattan, the heart of Manhattan, so much of our brand identity is built around the ambition and goals of the people that live in New York City, live in this environment. And we try, a lot of our branding, is all based around that. And, we try and embody, what our brand vision is, and illustrate that through the labels, and, through the little, you mentioned the stories and what else that we have there. But obviously, the Torch and Crown and the name, the logo, was inspired by the Statue of Liberty, which is obviously a quintessentially New York vibe. And it was initially about welcoming everyone to the city, and people trying to embark on, a new life in the city. And so much of that is embodied with myself, with the 2 founders. We're all from New Jersey, kind of grew up in the shadow of New York City, and, always wanted to work there, and always were inspired by it. And, that's what we're trying to deliver, and, and make that approachable to well, hopefully as our core audience, of people who are like-minded individuals like that in the city, who are seeking something, that's made here, brewed right in the middle of everything, that they can get behind and follow along with. So.
All right. Well, fantastic. So we, I think we have a few minutes, and we got a few questions that came through. So why don't we go off script and take some questions here? Grace, do you want to handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been monitoring some of the questions that have been coming through. And thank you, Jill and James, for taking us through that really, really dynamic discussion. One of the ones that I wanted to get into right away is actually asking James you a question. One of the things that I get asked all the time as a part of Beers Without Beards, is this a festival that's just for women? And my immediate response is no, absolutely not. We need everyone at the table. We need to bring all voices in, whether you're men, women, trans, however you identify. They all need to be at the table in order for us to create change in our community. So I'm so glad that you could join us for our panel today. This question from Alicia touches on that a little bit. She wanted to ask, as a male in the brewing industry, do you think women are being accepted more easily, or how have you seen that change, as a co-owner of Vault Brewing and also working for Chart Industries kind of on the production side? How have you seen that change in these last few years?
Yeah, there's been a shift definitely over the last decade, and it's been just an all-inviting, I think, attitude the industry has had, where beer is becoming genderless and it's becoming colorless. It's really about quality first, and people who appreciate that quality, and people who can make that quality. And as Dawn, as you mentioned earlier, beer is meant to bring people together. And we just seen such an amazing example of that as a craft brewing industry. I've been in the industry since 2012, and there was a lot more men in the industry. We talked about the CBC being very much like a sea of men, but it is evening out, and there's more and more women that are being a part of it. And the reason is because this beer is great, and we're all human, and we all enjoy tasting good things. We all appreciate quality when it's presented to us. So I think that the industry is just open arms to people who can talk the talk, to people who enjoy the same things other people like. I think that the stigmas of beer being a male drink have been stripped, and there's still probably a little more work to do to create a more fully gender even industry. But we've made great progress, and I'm sure that we'll continue to do so next decade.
Nice. And I think, one of the things that have really even brought us closer together is the fact that we all as humans have been going through this pretty challenging year with everything that's happened with COVID and the pandemic and the movements that we've seen happening across the US. So I'm going to pull this question up really quick from Save the Breweries just so you guys can see it. And then I'll probably take it away because it kind of cuts off Dawn because we have so many people joining us, which I don't want to do. But at the beginning of our panel, Save the Breweries asked, do you feel that any of the breweries have been treated unfairly during this pandemic, or just in general, how has COVID affected your business and how have you had to change things? I know Julie and Megan, you touched on this a little bit. So Julie, if you could maybe kind of take us away and share your thoughts with us first. How has the pandemic really affected how things have been running at Denizens?
I mean, it's turned the entire beer industry into a total shit show. Let's be honest about that. We've had to pivot. God, that word is so freaking annoying at this point, but it is what it is, right? We have had to pivot on every level, from all of a sudden doing, direct to consumer home delivery, to our wholesale numbers have skyrocketed, but it's in cans. We're not really selling kegs, so our margins are down. And then, the social distancing measures in place in the tap rooms, and, operating just as a pickup place for a time being. And now we're doing, seated and all those things. It's been really difficult, but I'm going to be totally honest. I have days, like even just like 2 days ago, somebody, sent me a text. It was like, "Hey, how you doing, Julie?" And I was like, to be totally honest, I'm super depressed today and feeling really anxious. I'm like, this sucks. But I try to be optimistic when I can and like put my head down. And one of the things that I have found that has made this a little bit more bearable is that I am in the ear of all of my legislators up and down the board, whether you're talking about my U.S. senators, my, U.S. representatives, to my state senators, state delegates, to my local county council people. There's a lot of actions that the government can take, and we as an industry need to be asking for those things to happen. It's one of the things that I'm the most proud of as a board member for the Brewers Association is the advocacy that we've been able to do on the government level, whether it's, making sure that we're paying, our fair share of taxes, in the sense that we're not paying the same rate as Budweiser, for example, as small breweries, to, making sure that we're getting things passed like the CARES Act, which has been a huge help to small businesses, but there needs to be more done. And so for me, I wouldn't say that the regulations have unfairly treated breweries. I mean, there may be pockets in the country where some states are treating breweries differently. That has not been our experience in Maryland. And again, we're a brew pub, so we're also technically a restaurant. So we get treated like a restaurant as well. So maybe that's just our experience. But really, if you feel like things are unfair right now, you need to be advocating to your locally elected officials and all the way up to your US senators and congresspeople, because they want to listen to you. If you're a constituent and you vote, they will listen to you. Send them emails, call them, harass them. It's literally their job, is to listen to their constituents. You sent them there to represent you. Make sure they hear your voice. And so that's how I'll answer that question.
That is probably the best advice that actually I've gotten, or the most like actionable, advice that I've gotten. And I think it's very prevalent or particular to us here in the US, but this is a global pandemic. And Maíra, you're in Brazil. So what have things been like for you with COVID in a totally different part of the country, of the world?
Well, yeah. It was like, of course, for everybody, it was a big shock, and like sales decreased like immensely. It was like a very, very bad situation for everybody here too. And we didn't control the pandemic so well. We didn't control the spreading of the virus so well. I think we're the second worst country behind you. Yeah, the second wave never came here, so it's kind of bad, and the business suffer a lot. Now it's getting back because the bars are being allowed to open, like with a lot of things that they need to do, of course. But it was like a lot of places closed here, like breweries, bars, restaurants. But we're trying to survive here too. I guess it's the same there too, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think one of the really unique things about craft beer is that we're a really collaborative community. And I like to think that we're kind of like a rising tide that's lifting all boats, and that, the more that, as Julie was saying, if we actually are active and write to our local politicians and congressmen, and just together bond and get through this, like that's the best way forward. I want to kind of leave it here by circling back around with Jill, because she's had a chance to really moderate our panel. And I know she has a few ending comments that she wants to leave us with, but we haven't had, as much of a chance to hear from her, just because she's been the moderator. And she has actually a really amazing history and has been just a pioneer, not only in the craft beer industry, but from other financial and male-dominated industries that she's come from. So I really recommend, Jill and I did a Q&A on hopculture.com that gets a little bit more into her background. And I really recommend heading over to our magazine and checking out that article, which really touches on how Chart has been a leader and a pioneer in their diverse and inclusive programs. But Jill, I want to kick it back over to you just to share a few more comments that you have with us before we wrap up this panel here.
Sure, it's just been such a pleasure, and everything that I would have said has been captured today, so it's been great. Two closing comments. One is, while we talked primarily over the last hour about being female leaders, ultimately, I'm certain that the four panelists would agree with my closing comment that I don't want to be the best female CEO. I want to be the best CEO, and I think everybody would thumbs up that one. And it's funny because every now and then I'll get an award for being the best in the female category, and I'm like, well, I want to be the best in the total category. So anyway, and then I would also say, I think Maíra, a comment that you made on your last answer was, I'm proud of it. And you guys exude that, and there's nothing better than being proud of what you do. So thank you for taking the time. We're going to conclude with a cheers, and Julie, thank Emily and Jeff too for me. This one is the high alcohol content. So for the other three, that's why I picked this one. And we have a Chart Nitro glass for any brewer on the line. If you'd like to contact Chart, we're at let's see, ln2docers@chartindustries.com, and Grace can send that to you. If you email us, we'll send you some glasses. So thanks for all your time, and just loved it. It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And a special thank you to Chart, to Jill and James for hosting this panel. That is the conclusion of our Beers Without Beards Women in Craft Beer Festival, empowered by Bumble. Yes, thank you. It's been an incredible day of workshop. Actually, incredible. We started on Wednesday, so an incredible 4 days of workshops and panels and cooking classes and art classes, and just learning about how we can break through all these stereotypes in our industry. So I just want to say cheers to everyone out there. Cheers to all of you. Thank you so much for helping support the achievements of all women in craft beer, whether you identify as cisgender female, or whether you're trans, or whether you're from, wherever. This is a very inclusive community, and we're just so happy to be here enjoying this beverage that we love called craft beer. So cheers, everyone.